Welcome. Do you have some different socks? We're in need of different socks over here. I don't know if you can hear my daughter. I invite you to breathe into your heart. Good morning, Sam. Thank you for being here. There is a bliss that comes from tuning in. Lenny, welcome. Tuning in has a simple gift. What's happening? Something is always there for you to feel. If you anticipate or expect, you might miss it. The question is more, what do you feel? Water is life. I pray that this water embody the vibrations I need and thus become medicine for me increasingly throughout the course of this class time. There's an evil present in the world. I invite you to respect that it always is born in blame. Blame is a force that does not exist. It says that my actions are determined by someone else's behavior. No matter what someone else does, I always have the capacity to respond differently. Blame doesn't exist. Responsibility exists. And guess what? It's always two separate questions. It's not, am I responsible or are you responsible? We're both responsible, always. What are you responsible for? What am I responsible for? If this doesn't make sense, look at the word. What are you able to respond to? And what am I able to respond to? Anthony, good morning. Thank you for being here. Tom, welcome. Sarah. It's possible to see into the future. The reason it's possible is because the future exists on tracks. Time is more like a track. And you can look ahead into the track and have a recognition of major critical shifts. When you're looking at those major critical shifts, however, from far enough away, something could look like a war because the clash of energies are just as intense as other moments along the timeline that have been a war. And yet, knowing that those energies clash does not mean you know that they will be violent. The capacity to experience the same clashing in a different way is the difference between where we create reality and everything being predestined. If you don't examine your expectation patterns in life, you could think that fate is real because you have already sacrificed your ability to recognize your own power in the equation. When you pray for responsibility, you're saying, what is my ability to respond, including all the things that I wasn't aware that I could influence? We've been talking a lot about a rainbow lately, and I want to bring this up. This is a very simple dividing line. Are you setting the table for a rainbow or not? If you identify as one color in the rainbow, I don't care which color it is. If you're saying yellow is better than blue, which is better than red, which is better than green, that's not a way to have a dinner party with all the colors. When you set the table and bring your color to the table and begin with this basic respect that you have an incredible gift in the hue. You are a hue man. Your hue is an incredible gift. Let go of the baggage that suggests that you get to dictate the rules for everybody. Reality is all a grand compromise. Forgive me for not knowing more. The Indians gave us 0. The Hebrews gave us the week. The Romans gave us 10 as a basic counting system, and the current calendar we use, although I'd prefer we ditch it. The Sumerians gave us the 60-second, minute, and hour. And initially, their divisions were 2 hours long, so you had 12 hours in a day. The compromise that we embrace as real. Oh, and the English gave us the language that is most used and that we're sharing. But the English language was composed of Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, Danish, French, Norman, Norse, when the Vikings came, all a grand clash collage. And that's one of the reasons it's so diverse and versatile. It's complicated to learn, but it expresses a wide range of feeling. The world's given us what we've got. And when we trace backwards too much, we make a really deep mistake. Today, my challenge to you is a challenge that I am embracing more deeply than I ever have. Really, really begin to identify with your soul. Now, I invite you to sense you are standing at the edge of water. You know that on the other side of this water is where you want to go, but there's so much fog that you can't see. In fact, the fog is so thick that all you can see is a stone just a long step away. So you could barely reach your foot out to rest on that stone. Now you can still do it and keep your weight on the land, but just barely. So you do this, you reach out and you touch the stone, and then you pull it back and you're like, wow, that's real. Okay, that's real. Wow. But you're back on the soil, you're back on the shore. But you need to be over there. You need to be on the other side. So you reach out again and you rest it a little longer, and then you pull it back. And you're like, whoa, there's something intense that happens when I put my foot there. That's amazing. And you turn around and you tell your friend, oh my God, there's a stone over here. It's incredible. And your friend's like, yeah. Whatever. That's just fog. Stop exploring that way. It's like, but I got to go this way. I don't know why I need to. Oh, you're a little crazy. Stop bothering me. And so at a certain point, you stop talking to your friend. And you turn and you face into the fog. And you reach your foot out and you rest it. You rest it on that stone. You leave it there. You feel what it feels like to have one foot on the shore and one foot on the stone. This is where many people get. It's a very powerful position. It gives you the ability to transcend a lot of problems. It gives you the ability to gain perspective on many of your life challenges. It gives you the ability to let go of many addictions, or even the desire to pursue life in multiple range of ways, because you know that this path is real, and that gives you hope and a sense of guidance. And yet you're still resting your weight on the shore. The shore. I am sure that this is real. I've been living over here for a long time. I'm sure I can count on this. If I keep walking into this fog, I don't know what's going to happen. So you hesitate and you hesitate again, and maybe you pull your foot back and you go back to the shore and you lower your head, and you know that they don't want to hear it really. They know that they treat you perhaps as crazy, perhaps as beautiful, but they don't want to follow you. They don't want to hear about it. They tolerate it. Who knows? They. It's not about them. When you trust your inner guidance, you turn around again. And you reach your foot out and you rest it on this stone, and then You begin to experience what it is to lift your foot off the shore, to not be sure of what's going to happen, to not be in certainty. But you can only see this far into the fog. The only way you are going to see further down this path is to move yourself further down the path, even though you don't know where it goes. But you do. Because something in you knows that there is a deeper trust that doesn't necessarily express itself in a certainty. It doesn't give you the kind of vision or promise or contract about the future that you would perhaps desire, but it's deeper than that. The intuitive wisdom within you that says this is the way leads you into the fog during times of critical transition because you are not yet capable of comprehending what lies around this bend. This is a bend. It is not a final end. The Abrahamic religions all have a problem. The Abrahamic religions, in case you don't know, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all believe in Abraham. It's a critical feature in their reality. When I went through my first awakening, I tried to go back to sleep. Many of you are better than that, but this was 25 years ago. I tried to go back to sleep, but I was tortured. It was so difficult to bear the feelings I was going through, and I was so far from everybody else. I tried to tell my friends, they loved me. They thought I was a beautiful person, but I was increasingly difficult to be around. At least that's my interpretation of their responses. I lived through so many possibilities in my head of how to coexist with them. But eventually I had to step on that stone and step into the fog. And when I did, my reality began to fall apart. In the process of my reality falling apart, nothing meant anything anymore. Everything lost its meaning. I was walking down the streets of New York City, and I was in a warped realness where I could identify 3 critically different personality types. And it was like I was just looking around at everybody. I'm like, oh my God, they all fall into 3 distinct types. And I was just like, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I was decoding reality and personality patterns. But a normal conversation meant nothing. I eventually found my way to a book by Kierkegaard, Fear and Trembling. In this book, he decodes the story of Abraham and Isaac. Now, I am not heavy on making you listen to Bible stories. There's deep value in this one. First of all, we're looking at a critical tipping point. To understand what unifies what are often called the Abrahamic religions, I'd like you to be present with this lesson. Kierkegaard could not make sense of a God that would ask anyone to kill their own son. And that was the story. Abraham was asked by God to sacrifice his own son. Kierkegaard could not handle the concept that any loving God would ever do this to us. And he wrestled with the story again and again, and he tried interpreting it this way and this way and this way. And so he told it from the perspective of a vengeful God, from the perspective of a trickster God, from the perspective of a loving God. And what he finally found was that the most important element is that God didn't ask Abraham to kill his son. That's what Abraham heard. And because that's what he heard, he had to go through the experience of feeling that. But when God stopped him, what he learned was in the process of giving up what he loved the most, he got everything. It doesn't mean kill what you love. It means stop clinging to it, and God will give it back to you. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam have not understood this lesson, in my opinion. It is a lesson of how to unify heaven on earth. And it is a transcendent threshold that once you go past it, people have a hard time relating to you. It has been so beautiful for me. I cannot tell you how many times it just liberated my soul. I practically got addicted to life falling apart because in that freedom, I could be present with the divine in a way that always seemed to show me what to do next. And this is one of my greatest gifts for you now, because this is going to be a decade of this. I encourage you to understand it this way. It's going to be a decade of this. I've gotten the message again and again. Things aren't going to calm down until 2034. For 10 years, you need to be open to just extraordinary chaoses. And if you read this through the old stories, we're back to the sense that, yes, people from the past, John, the Gospel of John, I don't know if you know, but this is the one that talks about Armageddon. Nostradamus, 1500 years later, nonetheless, also seeing into the future, making accurate predictions in many ways. And yet, what they were doing was seeing patterns. But the clothing on those patterns had not yet been decided. We are entering patterns of transformation. And when you have a limited ability to interpret reality, they look like the end. When you think that the tree is the flower, when the flower dies, you think the tree is dead. It's not. It's the Maya and the Hopi and the Dene who taught me that beneath all this is simply a turning of the age. It's a turning of the age that ends his story. It ends the dominance of an assertive masculine force. Now, not masculinity itself, but a certain kind of assertive masculine force that's focused on dominance. And thus we have been living through thousands of years of dominance stories. The purpose of this was to digest karma, and it's coming to an end. This is a celebration. But in this celebration, all of the old stories rise to the surface. All of the old wounds become exposed, and we have to make a decision. Have you ever argued, this is only going to work for Americans. More people in the rest of the world know this than Americans because we have an extraordinary ability to deny our problems here. Have you ever tried arguing with an Israeli or a Russian about how they treat other people? You know what the conversation's going to lead to pretty shortly? What the fuck happened to the Native Americans? And they're right. This is the time of revelations. We've been living in lies. That's why we need the truth to be revealed. We've been living in lies. Lies have been told by the victors. This has been an era of dominance. So whoever dominates has written the story. When's the last time someone who dominated and won told a fair story about those they held down? It doesn't happen because it's too tempting to take your excess baggage, wrap it up, call it darkness, call it not yours, dump it on someone else, and then use violence and other forms of dominance in the world to force them to eat your shit. This is the story of his story. And it's the same fucking boring story over and over again. People can tell you it's complicated. It's not complicated. When you trace it to the root, this is it. And the thing is, nobody can hold other people accountable until they're looking at themselves. And when you look at yourself, you say, who am I? And when you say, who am I? You're back to the edge of this river in the fog. When I know myself as American, I look at my heritage and I know myself not just as an American, but one of the original Americans. We're here on the Mayflower. Some of my parents' families, one was Jamestown, one was Plymouth. Right back to the roots. One of my direct grandfathers was in the Boston Tea Party. He was the sheriff of Boston. When I was young, this was exciting. And then I met Native American teachers because I was going batshit crazy and they had the medicine for me. And you want to know one of the first elements of medicine they gave me? You killed my fucking people. And it was that you that became so interesting because I found something after a while. If I let go of this, if I let go of this sense of who I am, if I let go of this, like, I'm an original American, I'm a great, archetypal wealth of this country. If I let go of it and I turn and I face that fog and I step on that stone, you know what happened? In this lifetime, I'm of this family and heritage, but in the last time, I wasn't. See, every single being on earth has to ask a question. Who were you in your last lifetime and the one before? Everyone who hates has to ask a question. Are you sure that it was you that was alive 3,000 years ago and can identify with that injustice? Are you sure it was you that was alive 200 years ago and can identify with that injustice? Are you sure you weren't the abuser in that lifetime? Are you sure? And when you know this as a relevant question, you can stand on that stone in the fog. And when you take a step and you stand on that stone in the fog and you are sacrificing everything you've known by leaving it. And you stand and you say, who am I? And you know yourself as your own spirit tree. Now, let me tell you something about your spirit tree. Your spirit tree is born in the darkness. Your spirit tree is born in the darkness. If you think that you're not darkness and that darkness is someone else, darkness is your enemy, can't get past this boundary. It's the biggest boundary. I can't tell you how many people I love they can't even access this one. They can't do it because they still think they're the light. You are the light, but you're also the darkness. You're the seed that was planted in the soil. If you don't own your darkness, you don't have any roots. If you don't have any roots, your power levels are... You got to own your darkness. Your darkness begins as hell. Your darkness begins as hate. Your darkness begins as resentment and despair and terror. But you know what happens when you turn it and turn it? It turns into soil. You just keep saying, no, I'm not going to hate them. No, I'm not going to be that rage. No, I'm not going to fuel it. Because there has to be a distinction between your ability to see resentment and blame and rage and what you believe in as who you are. Because in every moment, we have this ability to invest in where we are by how we understand who we are. And this is when it becomes a necessity. You got to take your foot off the shore. Got to do it. We can't keep investing in these worlds where we blame. Here's the irony. When you remove your identity from this reference, I am not that, I am this. I am not that, therefore I'm this. I am not darkness, I am light. I am not bad, I am good. When you remove your identity from this and you say, I am my darkness and I am my light, and you own your roots into the soil and you're growing up to be the flower that's embraced in the light. When this is you ironically become open to engaging and loving with everyone. And you know what happens? Some people say no. And in their no, they're choosing not to be a part of the rainbow. And that is not your job to fix. It is your job to set the table. That is your responsibility. Now, if you want to decode global issues, make it really simple. Are they setting the table? Now, if you say, I set the table and the last time you came here, you were violent. Yeah, you can't be violent at my table. You have to be part of the rainbow. But you have to keep setting the table for every hue of the rainbow. If you don't keep setting the table, you are failing in your responsibility. And this is very simple. It's not complex. I don't care how old the story is. Find me a patch of earth that has not been fought over for thousands of years? Show me where it is. There are probably some. In South America, the Inca knew that silver mines, silver deposits in the mountains were waiting for a future people who would come. It wasn't for them. The Hopi knew that horned beasts would replace the buffalo before they'd ever seen a cow. They knew that there would be networks of roads and wires all across the land before they were even invented. The earth makes these choices. And if you attempt to identify with the tradition you are currently incarnated in, while ignoring the presence of the earth, you're missing the point. It's possible to be arrogant for your tradition. I had someone viciously criticize me for using some elements of yogic language out of context, that's a nice way of putting it. And they were stunned by my response that they were being arrogant, because they didn't feel arrogant. They're probably very humble in relation to their teacher who told them how to think. But they're arrogant for their tradition. You can't be part of a rainbow if you're arrogant for your tradition. I'm not telling you to let go of your tradition. You let go of it. What do you bring it to the table? But you have to allow it to go through an experience of sacrifice. God was not asking Abraham to kill his son. God was leading Abraham into a place where to him it looked like sacrificing his son to keep going. Really, he was being told to let go of his sense of ownership over his son. And this is what we are all being told to do with our own egos. You don't have to hate your ego and stab it on the ground. You just have to let it go. And if you can't let it go, you can't step into the fog because you are leaving what's sure. But ironically, nothing in this historical ego-laden world is certain. It's all a mess. We're surrounded by pain and confusion and blame and delusion. There's nothing safe about this place, but it's what we've known. And at a certain point, we can recognize, oh my God, the long chain of fights based in the same kinds of disagreements and refusal to set a shared table. None of them will be reconciled by power. There's a curse that comes with victory. And the only cure for the curse of victory is to take responsibility for those you have defeated. I know this because I live in the family heritage of America. We defeat, take the feet off. We cut the roots off of the Native Americans who lived here. It was prophesied that this would happen. Doesn't mitigate our responsibility one iota. She set it up to force us to take responsibility for what we are. And the curse that comes with having been victorious is healed when you take responsibility. I know this because I've done this. When you take responsibility in your heart, you understand you can't just force people to think the way you do. If you beat them with guns and violence and dominance over their economic status, you've taken responsibility for their spirit. And if you don't take this responsibility in a way that is deeply loving, fundamentally loving, you curse yourself. It's not them hating you that's cursing you. You curse yourself if you don't take fundamental responsibility. This applies across the board. I don't see the circumstance in which this doesn't apply. There are 2 million people locked up in the United States of America, and I assure you they do not all belong in there. We have used a dominance over people's minds and bodies to control our own terror. And I would suggest that more than 50% of the people who are locked up in the United States of America, the country that by far and away locks up the most people, more than 50% of those people are locked away for one reason. I want you to, like, what am I going to put in there? No, it's not just racism. People won't own their own darkness. People won't own their own darkness. They experience darkness in their life. It's generated in their body. And they try to give it to someone with dark skin or a dark soul or a dark understanding of who that other person is. They fight to get rid of the darkness they create. And some people lose. And when they lose, they actually become what they've been given. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible failure of spiritual responsibility. See, here's the thing. Here's the daunting thing. First of all, stop watching most movies. Stop watching most movies. Let me tell you what it is to win, all right? You have to get to the point. I've made speeches in front of hundreds of people more times than I can remember by far. A couple times, 2000s. Just a couple. I look forward to more, to be honest with you. I know what it feels like to be deeply appreciated and to have people thanking me years later for such. But there's a secret to these. Once you get used to it, you have a choice. Are you going to become the way other people see you? If you become the way other people see you, you're incredibly dependent on affirmation and adulation or any kind of feedback. In fact, you're going to start to feel hollow without it. There's a secret. When you win, if you get up there and you revel in the winning, in the victory, in the dominance over. I've gone through election cycles where I won and somebody else lost. I remember reveling in the feeling of it and then catching their eyes and making a choice not to continue to revel in it. And at one point I was invited up on stage in a dream. And as I got to the podium, there were like more than 1,000 people watching me. And there was a voice. So I was going up to the podium, and right here, I was going to turn and talk. And there was a voice over here that said, "Do you want to celebrate or do you want to go deeper?" And I went deeper. Here's what it looks like. Overall, over the long course of time, Gaia induces the people to win who she wants to win. But you have to take 2 steps. You can't just rest in the reasons that you won. You can't just use your victory to assert why they suck and why you're right. If you do that, you are failing at your spiritual responsibility. What you must do is take another step. Oh, but it's not fair. Why should I be a good person when they're still threatening to kill me? Because you can. You have the moral, ethical, mental, and emotional ability to remain strong and centered because you just won. You were not oppressed by the sense of loss and terror and awful subjugation to another force. You just generated victory over other human beings. So you have the capacity to step deeper and to recognize that you now have a critical spiritual responsibility for their soul. And if you don't live up to it, you fail. If you don't live up to it, you failed. Different rules. It's not an equal situation. You've been given the respect by the world of power. To know how to handle this power, is not to run around and argue with people who you know you can defeat, not to run around and make the same arguments over and over again, even if they don't work. And it's definitely not to stay in your fucking head and to ignore your heart. If you don't feel compassion for the people you defeat, you're not going to get further. Because it's in this moment when you recognize this kind of victory, it sucks. Literally sucks. Pulls you. It sucks your energy. I don't know if you all noticed, but I don't care. Like, in many ways, I'd like to disappear for a year and just wander in the woods. Now I care, but I don't need. What I need is love. What I need is to love you, me, my family, the world. What I need is to know that I'm doing the best job I can do. What I need is to feel that my potential is something that I'm measuring only with God. And Gaia is God's presence here. She is our spiritual godmother. She has taken responsibility for our soul, and it is only with her that you could be judged. Judgment Day is a real thing, people, and it's upon us. But it's not what they thought. You see, if you look at the events that we're currently going through, and will be for 10 years, a little more, if you look at them and get lost in the fervor of like religious fundamentalism and holding on to ancient interpretations of modern events, go off in the American desert. Go down and meet some Maya elders who can teach you what's real. We are going through the bend times. And as we do, what's your responsibility? Really? What's your responsibility? I invite you to hold that as a question. Bless you, Lenny. Yes, I love this. What's a concrete example of what you're saying when you don't own your own darkness? Well, the most common is a person applies for a job. They don't get it. They go home. Their kid has left their shoes on the hall floor and they're muddy. And they get really pissed and they throw the shoes down the hallway and they tell the kid to clean it up and they even hit the kid. So darkness is very simply energy that is out of tune with the energy that you're trying to create. So you're trying to live life this way, and then something happens and it's like there are two songs playing in the same room. You're trying to listen to one and the other one is just dissonance to you. Emotionally, this happens when people don't know how to digest grief. So that it's a big understanding for the right reasons. Grief involves fear or anger or sadness and even joy. The fear that you thought you were going to go this way, you were depending on it, and now what are you going to do? The anger that you were done wrong, that you weren't respected, that you weren't seen clearly. Sadness that it's like, oh my God, I thought I was going to get to hold on to that, and now I don't get to hold on to it. And even joy, because a part of you doesn't want that. And you have to learn to let that part of you have its voice and say, hey, I didn't want to go that way. Let's go some other way. These are all part of grief. You need to feel these feelings when you go through grief. But a lot of people have a block against one or all four of these feelings when life doesn't go the way they want. And so in those moments, if they then find someone else to take their anger out on, that's what they've done. They've tried to give that person their darkness. The shoes on the floor, it wasn't that big a deal. The reason they were so charged is because they'd failed to get this job application, this job. And this happens in multitude of petty ways. So anyone who has authority over anyone else can misspend that respect. Whenever you have authority over someone else, you have a spiritual responsibility, whether you know it that way or not. And most people don't know it that way. So whenever you're in a bad mood, that bad mood can influence how you treat them. You tell them to do too much work. You're heartless when they say they need to go home because their wife is sick and needs help. You're, brazenly, telling them they have to stay longer because there's more work to do and you don't want to deal with it. Your bad mood changes how they function. And because you have power over them in the world, you misuse that power. Now, when you own your darkness, it just means every time something happens to you, you're going to say, what's happening to me? You don't interpret what's happening to you through the outside. When shit goes crazy in the world, you know what I do first? I say, what's going on in me? Seriously, because when anything intense happens, it brings my own issues to the surface. So when I say, what's latent in me that I need to address, I'm working it out inside myself. Once I own that darkness, I say, I'm owning it. So I'm knowing it as my own, but I still haven't done anything yet. Now I say, I keep it this simple: fear, anger, sadness, joy. Which of those feelings might I be avoiding? I find them. I feel them. That transmutes the energy. The energy is no longer dissonant because I've given it space to have its voice. It's finding a way to harmonize it into myself. Now, when I come home and the muddy shoes are on the floor, I go, come on. Why'd you put your shoes there? Dude, maybe this is a chance for you to learn to sweep and mop. I can bring an entirely different attitude to the way I share in the world. Now, on a big picture level, the way people are incarcerated, oh man, look, how many fights end up in incarceration? I don't know the numbers. But that fight probably started over something that was it sucked. Someone rear-ended someone else. Someone bumped into someone at a bar and spilled some beer on them. Someone looked at another man's wife in the wrong way. These are all legitimate things to be upset about. If you're then violent, we end up seeing it through the extreme. Okay, your violence is unacceptable. But the reality is, when we have an inner presence that's capable of recognizing our own negative influence, we no longer hide our shadow. Now, this is a really critical way of understanding it. Hiding your shadow means you depend upon a world being full of terror and pain. You do. You depend on it. You depend on it because you don't want to look at your own shadow. And if other people have a bigger shadow than you're not violent. You're relatively nice. You're fair in the world and deals. You're a good boss. But no, not really. You're not really very nice. You don't really own your own emotions. You're really kind of dull and you're not facing your dreams. But because there's a domestic fight on your block, you get to go, well, at least I'm not that bad. That's the hiding your shadow syndrome. And I look at it on a practical level. This is one of my favorite. Someone's bad at handling their own emotions. So they don't deal with grief well. They had a relationship that broke up recently, and they were hoping they were going to get married, and they own a store. So their relationship broke up. They own a store, and they're in the store tending the store, and someone with dark skin comes in. If they start looking at that person like, I wonder if they're going to steal something from me, that's not owning your darkness. Now, I assure you, every single person alive has the capacity to naturally recognize whether you're really under threat. You do. You have the capacity to recognize whether someone really has bad intentions. You do. It's not numerical. It's not based in percentages. It's based in intuition. It's based in intuitive intelligence. It means you're able to discern the difference between your mind and your expectations, the difference between your own darkness and the baggage and the pain you're carrying, and what another person in the world is carrying and expressing. If you don't know how to discern the difference between your own mental expectations and the baggage and pain that you carry inside yourself and the external world. You see the world through you. That's what projection is. So I think that my hand is not me. Well, actually, this is not working very well because that's blocking the light, right? But whatever you see as a projection, I think that, wow, that person has a smudged face. I am looking through something that's mine at someone else and imagining that they are what I'm holding in front of me. This is how it really works. We energetically create the sphere around us and we're looking through that sphere at others. But if we can't recognize what's ours, then we're treating them as if they are our fear, our pain, our hatred. I'm treating it as them. And then I treat them that way. And they say, what the fuck's your problem? And you say, see, look at how angry they are. Because something really just happened there. You really hurt them by seeing them through your darkness. That's why every single week I reinforce this. It's the most critical spiritual theme to begin with. You own your darkness, you're liberated. You are free. There is no victory in a victory over whose darkness wins. What we're looking at in the world right now is it's the dark ages. Individuals and cultures are still at ridiculous levels of hostility with each other, fighting over who's going to eat the shit. And the shit is the cumulative darkness of everyone in the culture saying, I don't want to face my pain. I don't want to face my lost dreams. I don't want to face my hope. I don't want to face my fear. It's their fault. It's just one big darkness war. I see very few public voices that even begin to embrace this, honestly. You know what happens a lot? It's like a sack race. People running with a leg tied together. That's what polarized communities are like. Democrats and Republicans, that's what they're like. What happens is the world over time gives dominance to certain forces. And then when it gets too out of balance, an entirely different community comes in and says, you guys suck. It's your fault. And they're right. Like there's an imbalance there. It needs to be brought into check. So this fight, this polarized fight, is this haphazard way of forcing us to deal with our darkness by one community throwing it into another, and ideally not turning it into violence. But it's still not taking responsibility for the core forces. When you take responsibility, it always traces back to you, just as you. And when you do that, you always get led to this threshold where you're standing at the edge of water, and there's a deep fog, and there's a stone, and you have to take a step to put your trust in walking onto this stone out into the fog. And you can't see further than that stone until you stand on that stone. And you just have me sitting here telling you, if you stand on that stone, there's another stone. And after that one, there's another. Then there's 12 more, and then you're on the other side. Your soul knows the rainbow. Your soul knows the rainbow. Your soul wants the rainbow back. Your soul knows what it feels like to be the full rainbow. Full rainbow. Your soul knows what it feels like. When you're the full rainbow, you don't take sides in the same way. You say questions. Questions. How do I set the table for everyone? Are they saying no? Why? Is there something I can do to set the table for them in a way that will really invite them to the table? They said no. I've done the best I can. Okay, I'm gonna keep that space set. People make their own decisions, almost always. And you do this in an individual level, and you do it on a cultural level. You setting the table for everybody? No? You have a mental reason that that's right? You have a mental justification? What's in your heart? I assure you, there's no answer that's true that doesn't involve love and compassion. I mean, the presence of love and compassion, not the ostensible idea of love and compassion. I assure you, there is no answer that's true that doesn't involve the presence of love and compassion. And ultimately, hatred eats itself. I can't tell you enough about the power of Aikido. I only studied a little. I learned what I needed. The principal understanding is that you can relate to violence and hatred in the world in a way that flips it back upon itself. And thus, you gain the discipline to not hurt people any more than they essentially hurt themselves. This isn't a mental understanding or evaluation, it's karmic. When you maintain this commitment, you have to practice it over and over and over again. This is not peace, like I'm going to walk into a situation and get hit. Someone attacks my family, I'm going to protect them. This is not a lot of things that you might think of as being a good person or become a pacifist in the face of wars. This is, how do you hold the spiritual responsibility for victory with only what's necessary? Only what's necessary. And when you do that, you find that flipping someone's aggression back upon themselves creates a window. They will hurt themselves, invariably. If they direct aggression at you, you're going to keep praying for what actions do you need to take to flip the aggression back on itself so it destroys itself. To do that is not the same as to defeat a monster, you must become a monster. It's different. Sorry to say it, alpha bros. It's different. And the difference here is profound because there's a window. When someone throws aggression at you and then they've hurt themselves, it's flipped back on them. Karmically, this is going to happen. Then you have a window in which to pray. How can I set the table for them? What changes do I need to make to actively set the table for them? And it's this question. You're holding space for the question. And when this is working well, it's not draining. You're not wishing they'd come. You're not reaching after them. You're giving them space to make their own decisions. I'm talking about ex-friends, ex-partners, and other cultures who you're at war with. Bless you, Lenny. Bless you, Lenny. So, Luke, here's the thing. Love can really be simple. Start it here, please. Love is more than a feeling. Do you want to know one of the best songs ever? I was singing it this morning. The power of love is a curious thing. Makes a one man weep, makes another man sing. Change your heart to a little white dove. More than a feeling. That's the power of love. I think of love as the first and last word. It's more than a feeling. It generates feeling. It's more than a feeling. It generates feeling. Love is not the buzz. The buzz is a gift of love. But love is present at these moments of incredible absence. If you've never known the absence of resonance, one of the greatest errors. The annihilation of your sense of spiritual presence is awful once you learn to depend on it. When we put our hand on our heart, there's this simple choice. Breathe in, breathe out. That's all you're choosing, right? And within that, you could stasis, you could be still. So all you're really doing is you're making that choice. Am I going to breathe in? Am I going to breathe out? Or am I going to stay still? You're just making that choice over and over and over again. Which choice is going to be more vibrant? which is going to have a crisper, richer sense of vibration right here. Now, come on, you feel something. Even if you think you're failing at this. I talked to someone last week who feels like they're failing at this. Let it be simple. Just what feels better? On any level, what feels better? To breathe in, breathe out, or stay still? If you do this over and over and over again, you're going to enjoy it. You will enjoy it. And once you find this relationship where you enjoy it, you're going to want to do it more. If you listen to some kind of discipline, like breathe in for 3 seconds, breathe out for 3 seconds, like, look, you are going to extend the calisthenic boundaries of your lungs. I do encourage you to do that shit sometimes, but not as your primary answer. You want to get your lungs stronger that way, but it's not going to lead you into the incredible rhythm of the earth. Your body is the earth. You look at waves, they don't hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why I hate mainstream music and auto-tune. Nature doesn't do shit like that. Nature does not make music like that. Nature goes. That's how your breath wants to breathe. This is wild breathing. You find wild breathing in your heart, you're going to be able to ignite your heart. So much comes to life. And then you start to get used to it. It's like, oh. And now it just calls me back. I'm like, oh, I'm a little tense, can't breathe. Close my eyes, take some space, breathe. Before one of the most violent experiences in my entire life, when I was set to confront a man who I believed was raping a woman, I meditated for 10 minutes. Right in the middle, outside, in an urban environment, I meditated for 10 minutes, sitting on a stone bench. And you know, when I was done meditating, I knew. Felt the guidance. And when I confronted him with love. Most violent person in some cases. I thought of him as the most violent person I'd ever met. Bless his living soul. I was learning not to project my darkness on anyone else. I really was. It was one of the key lessons I was going through. I thought of him as one of the most violent people I'd ever met. When I stared at his eyes, I thought of him as someone like me, who fought for survival, who fought for the freedom to stay on top of the terrors he was living in. And that's what worked. To hold my heart, meditate, and to own my darkness is what kept me safe in one of the most violent situations of my life. People often check out. They're like, yeah, I'm going to touch my foot on the stone. This is how we began today. We're standing at the water and we're looking into fog. We're standing in a body of water. We're looking into fog. We don't even know how far away the shore is on the other side. And there's a stone and it looks like it could take your weight and you can reach your foot out. Are you going to shift your weight to rest on it? Are you going to shift your weight to rest on your spiritual presence? Because this is the river we're talking about. There is an extraordinary transformation that happens when you identify with your spirit. But you can't just play around with it when things are nice and then forget about it when things are difficult. It's there for when things are difficult. You are practicing to prepare you for the extremes. You are practicing for the extremes of your life. And that's when your spiritual practice will be with you if you practice. And I assure you that practice can be joyful. And eventually it gives you the strength to shift your weight and to stand on that stone. And once you stand on that stone, you see another one. And you do the same thing again, but it's easier now because you know what it feels like to be your trust. And you step on, good 20 stones, you're across. And this is what it feels like inside yourself. You're shifting your identity from your ego your body to your spirit. And it takes some steps. And there's some stepping forward and stepping back. But the critical lesson here is not distance. You're not really crossing a river. You're really trusting. And the ability to learn to take these steps in trust means that you have that ability with you to do it the next time and the next time. I just went through one of the, it was the worst wave of trauma healing I've been through in a year, that I've been through in 5 years. I just moved through it. You can look at the past 3 weeks of videos. I made videos about what I was going through. I could have told you something that sounded spiritual and strong. I could have presenced myself in a way that was tight and clear. I could have. I know how. I didn't. I showed you where I am. Because the critical lesson here is not that I don't fall down. It's not that I don't fall back. It's not that I'm never in my worst. I am in my worst. And when I'm in my darkness, I'm in my darkness. So you know I'm not going to project it on you. I'm not going to try to make you take on my darkness. When you understand how important this is, you'll tell Yogi Bhajan to fuck off with me. By the way, Shiva told me to kick his ass. He did. Really. He said, "You're helping clean up for me." He said that. If you don't understand this story, I invite you to look into it. I love you guys. I give you the best I know how to share. Got to tell you, I'm really stressed out. I'm running out of money. I've been paying people for a year to help me. We've produced 2 courses. I'm running out of money. It sucks. I'm pissed. I'm pissed inside. Like, my pure-hearted wonderfulness is supposed to have been working better than this. But the courses are almost done. We're stress testing the first course in a system. And the biggest thing you could do is to invite other people. This is medicine. This is the best medicine I could possibly find. That has always been my prayer, to give people the best and most efficient medicine that I could be a part of creating and bringing to you. I hope you feel it that way. I hope you recognize it that way. And I hope you tell other people about it. If you've not taken the course, I invite you to consider it. It's really wonderful. And the system Alora and Miguel have helped me create, produce the videos. It's in a really clear space where all the practices are together now, very easy to follow, keeps track of everything you've done, and lets you know sort of updates on what you should remind yourself to try. Really proud of it. It's the best way I know to empower you to face your own darkness, to embody as part of yourself. Please be present with these. You are a wildflower. You are a wild, flowing spiritual fire. You are the roots that reach into the ground and the light and the color of the flower itself. You are this whole. You are this whole. By owning your darkness, you learn to transmute and compost the terrors and pains of your experience. You learn to grow your roots deeper into the ground and draw deeper sustenance, turning the darknesses that have terrorized and sabotaged and undermined you into sustenance, turning it into fuel, turning it into soil, turning it to dirt, and giving you the strength to rise high and light your light, bright and beautiful, a wild flowing spiritual fire flower. I'll see you soon in the sanctuary. If you haven't considered joining us, please do. We're going to be together, do a meditation, and talk about it some. And it's a joy to have a safe space to gather and share and go deeper. Thank you for being here. Much love. Be with you and your families.